the euphemisms a long time ago. I think the American people did too. This is 5,300 employees. Wells Fargo calls them team members. 5,300 team members forging signatures, stealing identities, social security numbers, and customers' hard-earned cash so as to hang on to their low-paying jobs and make money for the high-paid executives at Wells Fargo.
As Ohio Senator Sen Brown at a hearing today on Capitol Hill called to investigate the massive systemic fraud at Wells Fargo uncovered by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Over a 5-year period, more than 5,000 Wells Fargo employees opened up millions of accounts for customers without the customer's knowledge. The scheme yielded just $2.4 million in fees for those customers, but it drove the bank's stock price up, made hundreds of millions for executives, none of whom have been fired. At the hearing this morning, the CEO of Wells Fargo had a pretty rough go of it.
Okay, so you haven't resigned, you haven't returned a single nickel of your personal earnings, you haven't fired a single senior executive. Instead, evidently, your definition of accountable is to push the blame to your low-level employees who don't have the money for a fancy PR firm to defend themselves. It's gutless leadership.
Joining me now, Senator Sherrod Brown, ranking member of the Senate Banking Committee. And Senator, this is such a the malfeasance here and the fraud seems so brazen. What were you trying to learn in this hearing in terms of, I think a lot of people when this first broke thought, well, how do you get 5,300 people independently doing the same thing without this being a bigger problem up the chain?
Well, a couple things we wanted to do. One is I wanted to make the contrast that 5,300 employees who were fired, mostly who were, you know, they said did things they shouldn't have, but they were under great pressure from management to meet goals that actually Wells Fargo has rescinded those goals because they were just too unattainable. 5,300 people fired. 90% of them were non-management, only 10% of the management. So they were making $13 an hour as tellers, $15 or $16 or $17 an hour as personal bankers. At the same time, the head of the section just retired at the age of 56, and she was given up to $120 million bonus. So I want to make those contrasts that bank executives make more and more and more money, and bank rank and file workers are still stuck at $12 and $13 and $14 an hour. So the second thing is, what's Wells Fargo going to do to begin to claw back some of this compensation? They have the right under the law to claw back, meaning to strip some of that $120 million package from her, to saying, frankly, you engaged in malfeasance, you didn't do good performance, you didn't meet our standards, you shouldn't get this kind of goodbye package. So we didn't get an answer from the CEO about that. He just said, well, I'll follow what the compensation committee would do. He never said he would advise the compensation committee under pretty intense questioning, never said he'd advise the compensation committee to claw back those dollars.
I mean, I just want to be clear here, right? We've got a bank management designed incentive structure that is paying, you know, is essentially incentivizing. Clearly, the management structure is amiss when 5,300 people independently are doing the same kind of gaming, right? So there's a management structure here that seems deeply at issue that doesn't stop at the 5,300 people who did it, one would assume.
Yeah, in addition to 5,300, there were hundreds, maybe thousands that just quit because they didn't want to live like this. Maybe they had another opportunity, so they moved on because of that, or they just quit because they just didn't think they could live under this kind of asking them to do whatever it takes, including breaking the law. But when you look at this company, no top managers, top executives, all of them making multiple millions of dollars a year, none of them had any give back, claw back, deductions from their pay, any penalties, while 5,200 low-wage workers lost their jobs. And hundreds others quit because they just didn't want to cheat, didn't want to be called to do these things.
So I just want to be clear, there is, as of now, for this scheme that was basically uncovered, there is no financial penalty that's been paid by anyone except the lowest level workers and a few people in management.
Yeah, and that's exactly right, Chris. And that's compounded by these firings have been going on for 5 years, starting at least 5 years, starting at least in maybe 2011, maybe earlier, 1,000 a year, 2011, 12, 13, 14, 15, roughly 1,000 a year. The CEO didn't know this was going on until the Consumer Bureau came in, and then the LA Times wrote about it. But he found out about these firings in these unauthorized accounts, apparently, he says, from the Consumer Bureau, not from this woman who was directly under him, whom he says he met with once a week for the last 8 years. He didn't find it out from her that they had fired 1,000 people a year for this kind of opening these unauthorized accounts. So something's amiss, and we don't know enough yet.
All right, Senator Sherrod Brown, thanks for your time tonight.
Thanks, Chris, for
Still ahead, a
shining light on it.
bizarre story about Donald Trump.